and play on 2nd and 10. That's his youth right there.
Tagovailoa trying to make up for it. Fires to the end zone. Touchdown! Alabama wins!
So today I'll be continuing with my college football game-by-game prediction and roster preview videos with the Ole Miss Rebels. So Ole Miss had the 25th ranked recruiting class in 2026. Didn't pick up any 5-star players, but did get 6 4-star players. And to have made a head coaching change, that was really good. So starting on the offensive side of the ball, Ole Miss was one of the best in the country here last year, averaging 35.3 points per game, and I expect similar to that this year, even with a new offensive coordinator. I really liked the hire that they made at offensive coordinator, bringing in John David Baker from East Carolina, who's been their offensive coordinator the past 2 years and has had a lot of success calling plays for them. And then he's a great fit for Ole Miss because right before coming to East Carolina for 3 years, he was the tight ends coach at Ole Miss, so he knows the offense that Lane Kiffin ran at Ole Miss, and he runs the same kind of offense that Lane Kiffin does, where the players, as soon as the play is over, run up to the line of scrimmage to snap the ball as soon as they can get lined up. So at quarterback, Ole Miss couldn't be in better shape with Trinidad Chambliss coming back. And while I'm not saying Trinidad Chambliss is the best college quarterback of all time, if Ole Miss were to win a national championship, though, I think you'd have to consider him. But for that, there's not a quarterback in college right now that's as good as Trinidad Chambliss. So he played in all 15 games last year, but he only started 13 games and had 3,937 yards passing and completed a really good 66.1% of his passes and averaged a really good 8.8 yards per throw and had a really good 22-3 touchdown interception ratio. And he's also way above average as a runner for a quarterback, running 133 times for 527 yards and 8 touchdowns, averaging 4 yards a carry. And then at wide receiver, they do lose Dazon Stribling, Trey Wallace, and Caden Lee. But they do get back Deuce Alexander, who had last season 44 catches for 684 and 2 touchdowns, averaging 15.5 a catch in 15 games. And they bring in from Syracuse Jonte Cook, who was a 4-star recruit who actually started his college career at Texas but couldn't get on the field. So he did have a pretty good year with Syracuse this past year with 45 catches for 549 and 2 touchdowns, averaging 12.2 a catch in 12 games. And they bring in another wide receiver from Syracuse, Daryl Gill, who was not a highly recruited player coming out of high school, but is a highly rated portal player. So he's played in 24 games the past 2 years for Syracuse and has a total of 63 catches for 1,076 yards and 7 touchdowns. And they also bring in Gerardo Fields, who is a highly rated portal wide receiver. Spent last season at Auburn, but only played in 4 games because of a broken foot. But the year before that, he was at Wake Forest, and in 2024 had 39 catches for 463 and 4 touchdowns, averaging 11.9 a catch in 12 games. So this is still going to be a really good wide receiver room. Now at tight end, I do see Ole Miss taking a step back because they lose Daquan Wright. But at running back, they're in great shape with Kewan Lacey coming back who I think is the best running back in the country, but I could be biased because I'm an Ole Miss fan. But even if you're not going to say he's the best, you've at least got to be willing to say he's the second best. Otherwise, I do think you are just an Ole Miss hater. Because Kewan Lacey last year had on 306 carries, 1,567 yards, and a school record 24 touchdowns, averaged 5.1 yards per carry in 15 games, and he's going to get 20 plus carries a game again this year.
And Atlanta, 2nd and 3 after the penalty. Lacey up the middle. Kewan Lacey's in the clear. It's a foot race. The Hurricanes cannot run him down. A lightning strike.
Ole Miss averaged a good 176.3 rushing yards per game last year, and I expect similar numbers to that this year because I expect similar play from the offensive line as to last year because of all they've got coming back. They returned left guard Delano Townsend, who's a really good player, and then center Bryson Sanders, who didn't allow a sack all year and only 12 quarterback pressures, and then they returned right guard Patrick Kudus, who was their best offensive lineman a year ago, and played and started 14 games for them and only allowed one sack all year. Then they bring in from LSU to play right tackle Carius Kearney, one of the top offensive line recruits of 2025. He played in 7 games and started 5 games as a freshman for LSU last year and did allow 3 sacks and 11 total quarterback pressures and 305 snaps. So he will need to play better, but hopefully that will happen with what should be better coaching. So now on the defensive side of the ball, they were good here last year too, giving up on average only 19.8 points per game, and I expect similar to that this year. Now on the defensive line, they do lose their best run stopper, Xavier Harris, and their best pass rusher, Prince Amon-Mielen, and they did give up 149.1 rushing yards per game last year, which was not great. Now, Amon-Mielen was kind of a weakness for them when it came to stopping the run, but they do return Cam Franklin and Will Eccles. Franklin last year had 69 tackles, 5 sacks, 45 total quarterback pressures, a forced fumble, and 3 pass breakups. And Eccles had last year 68 tackles and 5 sacks and 39 total quarterback pressures and 5 pass breakups. Those are 2 future NFL defensive linemen, but I expect Ole Miss to give up about the same rushing yards per game this year as they did last year. Now they do bring in from Oregon Blake Purchase, a 4-star recruit who was just a rotational player for them last year. Played in 14 games though and had 32 tackles and 2 sacks and 14 total quarterback pressures and a pass breakup and an interception. And now linebacker, this is, I think, the best part of the defense. This is a great group of linebackers. I think one of the best starting groups of linebackers in the country because they returned Centarian Perkins, who had last year 81 tackles and 4.5 sacks and 26 total quarterback pressures and 3 forced fumbles, an interception, and 6 pass breakups. And they bring in 2 really good linebackers. From Baylor, they bring in Keaton Thomas, who's been one of the best linebackers in the country the last 2 years. So in 25 games the last 2 years, he has a total of 219 tackles and 3.5 sacks, 2 interceptions, 1 for a touchdown, and a fumble recovery, and 31 total quarterback pressures and 3 pass breakups. And then they bring in from California Luke Farrell, who had last year 91 tackles and a sack and an interception and a pass breakup in 13 games. And then in the secondary, they were good here last year, giving up only on average 198.9 passing yards per game, and I expect similar to that this year. Their cornerback room is really good. They return Antonio Kite, who played and started 12 games for them last year and had 34 tackles and 5 pass breakups. And they returned Jalen Braxton, who played in 9 games last year for them, only because of an injury, but came on late in the season and had 24 tackles and 3 pass breakups and an interception. And they bring in from Auburn a 4-star corner, Jade Crawford, who was one of the top portal cornerbacks, who has in 23 games the past 2 years, 30 tackles, 11 pass breakups, and 2 interceptions. Then at safety, they bring in a 4-star from Georgia, Janelle Aguirre, who had last season in 12 games, 39 tackles, and 3 pass breakups and an interception. And then he was also a rotational player for Georgia in 2024. And then they bring in from Florida State Edwin Joseph, a highly rated portal player, just not a highly recruited player. So in 12 games last year, he started 10 of them. He had a total of 37 tackles and 3 interceptions and 5 pass breakups and a forced fumble. And then on special teams, their kicker Lucas Carnero is the best in the country. He made 31 of 35 field goal attempts last season, including 5 of 7 from 50 plus yards away and 9 of 10 from 40 to 49 yards away. And he was probably, besides Trinidad Chambliss, the top player in that win over Georgia. So now for the game-by-game predictions, starting with Louisville. So I do like what Louisville has got on defense, but even with Brom being an offensive-minded head coach, I don't see Louisville being able to keep up with Ole Miss offensively in this game, because Louisville's new quarterback is going to be making his first ever college start in this game, and with 4 new starters on their offensive line, it's hard to imagine them being ready to hold up against the Pete Golding defense. I do think this will be a competitive game, but I think Ole Miss pulls away in the fourth quarter and wins by about 2 touchdowns. And of course, I think they'll beat Charlotte. That'll just be a name your score kind of game. Ole Miss will be able to put in their backups at halftime in that one. But with Pete Golding being more of a defensive minded head coach, I doubt he'll be as into running the score way up in these types of games as Lane Kiffin was. So now the big game against LSU. I love Sam Levitt, the quarterback that LSU brought in, and if you don't believe me, take a look at my top 10 transfers video and see who I've got at number 1. But Levitt is the type of quarterback that can put the team on his back and win the game by himself, and maybe he'll do that in this game. But it is also true that he threw for 82 yards and a couple of interceptions in a loss to Mississippi State, in which Arizona State only scored 20 points against one of the worst defenses in the country. And I know you're probably thinking, because Lane Kiffin coached Trinidad Chambliss, it's going to help LSU because he'll know any weaknesses that Chambliss has. But the only weakness that Chambliss has is his height, because while I know he's listed as 6'1", he's nowhere close to 6'1" in reality. Seeing him on the field, I think he couldn't be more than 5'11", and he's probably more in the 5'10" range. So that causes his passes to be swatted down a little more than most quarterbacks. But how I see the coaching change at Ole Miss is I do think Lane Kiffin had a whole lot to do with Ole Miss's success these past 5 years, and especially the past 3 years. But my hope is that Golding, learning from Lane Kiffin, and then of course Nick Saban before that, is now ready to be a great head coach and keep the program in the great shape that Lane Kiffin has got it in. And I actually think he is ready to do that. So the rosters are overall pretty similar. I think this is going to be a very close, higher scoring game. I think both teams are able to get into the 30s, but it really just came down to home field advantage for me. So that is Ole Miss with that. So I'm going to go with Ole Miss to get this win. So now on the road at Florida. So I seriously considered giving Ole Miss a loss in this game because this is a tough environment to play in, and Florida's a team that, when it comes to talent, is actually higher than Ole Miss. They've just been so poorly coached over the last several years, and I expect that to change this year. But Florida, I expect their offense to be a whole lot better this year because they kept Jaden Ball at running back, who I think is the third best running back in the SEC, and with the wide receivers that they have. And their new quarterback is Aaron Philo from Georgia Tech, who's been their backup the last couple of years. Now, he's nowhere near the level of Trinidad Chambliss at Ole Miss, so I do expect Ole Miss to be able to still hold Florida within 24 points in this game. But I do like a lot of what Florida's got on defense, and I do think they'll probably, with it being at home, be able to slow down the Ole Miss offense a little bit and make it a close game. But I do think Ole Miss is good enough that they survive it. So now on the road at Vanderbilt. So the same thing I said about Vanderbilt in the Georgia video, the same thing is true when it comes to Ole Miss. Vanderbilt wouldn't have stood a chance last year of beating Ole Miss unless it was on a fluke day with Diego Pavia. So why should they stand a chance of beating Ole Miss this year without Pavia, and with Ole Miss returning 61% of their production, which is a whole lot to be getting back to be making a head coaching change? I don't think Vanderbilt's defense is going to be able to get very many stops on Ole Miss. I think Ole Miss will have no problem getting into the 30s in this game. Now, I do think Vanderbilt's a good enough team to make it somewhat competitive, but I do think in the second half Ole Miss will pull away and win it by at least 2 touchdowns. So now Missouri. So I think this is going to be a pretty close game. So the one running back I was talking about a while ago that you could possibly put ahead of Keywan Lacey plays for Missouri, Ahmad Hardy, and who was actually recently shot by a gun. But I saw that's not expected to affect his ability to play this fall, which is good news, even though I am an Ole Miss fan. And Missouri, though, their quarterback, Austin Simmons, was not that close to Trinidad Chambliss last year when it came to how well he could play the position of quarterback. And Missouri, I like a lot of what they've got on defense, too, and they're, I think, also going to have one of the best offensive lines in the SEC. But Missouri, they will have a good wide receiver to throw the football to, bringing in Caden Lee from Ole Miss, who until very recently I thought was actually staying with Ole Miss. I hate to lose him. I think he's got an NFL future, but overall Ole Miss does have the better group of wide receivers, so I think that and quarterback are what really make the difference and that get Ole Miss the win. On the road at Texas. So if Ole Miss is really 6-0 at this point, this is going to be a top 5 matchup. And last year, I'm pretty sure Ole Miss would have beat Texas, and I think they probably would have beat them the year before also. But Ole Miss and Texas have a total of at least 7 of the 32 first-round draft picks in the 2027 NFL draft. Ole Miss has 2 of them for sure, with Trinidad Chambliss and Keywan Lacey, and possibly 3 if Centurion Perkins can return to his 2024 form. If not, he'll be a early day 2 pick most likely. But Texas has 5 of them for sure, with wide receivers Cam Coleman and Ryan Wingo, and quarterback Arch Manning, and offensive lineman Trevor Gooseby, and defensive lineman Colin Simmons. And while I would give the quarterback advantage to Ole Miss, because Trinidad Chambliss is my quarterback 1 this season, if Arch Manning plays like he did most of last season in the second half of it, it won't be much of a quarterback advantage to Ole Miss. I expect this to be a shootout game, both teams score in the 30s, and a very close game. But as much as I would love for this to happen, I know the reality is Ole Miss isn't going to go 12-0. So with this one being on the road, I'm going to say Texas gives them their first loss of the season. Now Auburn. So I'd say this is certainly going to be a competitive game. I'd say Ole Miss and Auburn have 2 pretty similar defenses. And that Alex Golesh offense, I think, will probably have some success scoring on Ole Miss. They may be able to get to 28 points on them. But Auburn, I do not consider to have one of the better offensive lines in the SEC. And Ole Miss, I certainly do. And I think that's the real big difference. So I think Ole Miss does get this win by at least a touchdown. So now Georgia. So I'm pretty sure you can agree with me that Georgia has the best head coach in the SEC right now. And if you don't, I think you're probably just a Georgia hater. But Georgia doesn't just have the best head coach in the SEC. They have the best overall coaching staff in the SEC, to where they're the one team in the conference that you can always count on to make the 12-team playoff right now. But it's also true that Pete Golden coached circles around that coaching staff in the Sugar Bowl last year. And I know you may be thinking, how'd he do that? They only won by 5 points. Well, because Georgia had the overall better players than Ole Miss did. Now, they didn't have a Trinidad Chambliss or a Keywan Lacey, but they had the more talented linemen and still lost. And if Gunnar Stockton doesn't improve, there's going to be a pretty big quarterback advantage for Ole Miss in this game. And Ole Miss, I think, can match up well on the offensive line with Georgia. And the truth is, with Georgia right now, they don't have a wide receiver on their roster that would even scare Arkansas. Now, maybe they'll have 1 or 2 turn out to be really good, because they've certainly got the talent for it. But Ole Miss, well, they don't have a wide receiver right now that would give defensive coordinators nightmares. They've got several future NFL wide receivers on their roster, and defensively, Georgia, I think, will be much better than Ole Miss will at stopping the run. But when it comes to getting after the quarterback and stopping the pass, I don't think they will be. Because it's in Oxford, I'm giving Ole Miss the win here. So now on the road at Oklahoma. So when I first got ready to do my predictions for this video, I was thinking no higher than 10-2 for Ole Miss. So I was ready to pick Oklahoma to win this game because it's on the road. But Ole Miss beat Oklahoma at Oklahoma last year, and when I look at the rosters, Ole Miss still seems to be a little bit better than Oklahoma overall. Oklahoma has a better defense, I think, than Ole Miss, but Ole Miss still, I think, has quite a bit better offense than Oklahoma does. And I do think, like last year, this is going to be the one game that Oklahoma's defense struggles in, because I think Trinidad Chambliss is going to give their secondary a lot of problems again, even though I do think they'll again be able to slow down Keywan Lacey and the Ole Miss run game. I think Ole Miss is able to get into the 30s on them again and win it in a pretty close one. And of course, they'll beat Wofford. This will be one of those name your score kind of games where Ole Miss will be able to put in their backups for the whole second half. So now the Egg Bowl against Mississippi State. So if you think Lane Kiffin leaving has evened out the gap between Ole Miss and Mississippi State, you're wrong. There's still a huge gap between Ole Miss and Mississippi State that I don't see going away anytime soon. Now, Mississippi State will have a slight chance of winning this game because they always do because of the rivalry, but I don't see their rosters being close enough anytime soon to where you would actually wonder who to pick in this game. Now, I do like Mississippi State's new quarterback, Kamarian Taylor, who started in the Egg Bowl last year. I think he's going to do well in Jeff Lebby's offense. But like last year, defense and the line of scrimmage are going to be a big advantage, I think, to Ole Miss. And Trinidad Chambliss, I think, is going to, again, pick apart a weak secondary of Mississippi State. And, again, I don't think Q1 Lacey is going to have any trouble reaching 100 yards rushing in this game. I do think it'll be somewhat competitive, but I think Ole Miss will end up winning it by at least 2 touchdowns. So my final prediction for Ole Miss is 11-1 overall and 8-1 in the conference. So this would for sure get them back to the college football playoff, and this would get them in the SEC championship, likely in a rematch with Texas. So that'll be it with this video. Please subscribe. Thanks for watching, and I'll be back soon.